Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to paint the base for the Sigmarite Mausoleum. So the first colour we're using today is Citadel Rhinox Hide. It's one of the base colours. We're using this just to do the soil around all of the gravestones. It can be a little bit rough and ready with this. Try not to get it onto any of the grey. You probably will do, but as long as you get a decent layer on there, that's fine. Also painted the sides in this as well, just so that they weren't just black or grey or a mix of undercoat and base coat. Just painted those up so you've got grey bits where the stones are and you've got the brown on the sides where the soil is. Next colour that you're using is Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to use this to paint up all the bones. That does tend to be a slightly thinner colour this, so you may need to give it a second coat on certain areas to stop it having streaks. Provided it's not too bad, you should be okay, because once you have the shades and then the second layers and the highlights, if there's any little streaks on the base layer, you probably won't be able to see them at the end. Just finish off all these bones and skulls. We'll get on to the next layer. Next up, we're going to use some Citadel Mechanicus Standard Grey. I'm just going to use this to paint up some of the areas where we've got a little bit of Rhinox hide on the grey. Just touch that up so you've got a nice smooth colour. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Dawnstone. Just going to use this on a few of the little flagstones there and a couple of the graves just to break it up so they're not all the same colour. Just want to add a little bit of difference to certain parts of it. The next colour is going to be Vallejo Modeler Silver. I'm just going to paint this big slab on the top here. Paint that with it. The idea is to paint this one a very bright silver. Use some paints to corrode it a little bit and then do the top parts with a kind of copper and then gold. Get a few little metallics on there just to make it look quite bright, so it's a bit of a special grave. Like so. Next up we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Fulgurite Copper and do the next part of this plating. Because you've got the gaps between the bits in the wings there, you just poke that in with your brush. And when you come to do the next layer you'll be able to paint that out with the gold if you've got any of it on the central eagle there. Try and get those side edges done as well, like so. Now we're going to use some Citadel Retributor Armour just to paint up some of the details on the other gravestones and the eagle on the top of this one. It's just to add a little bit more colour to it, so it's not just all stone. So next up we're going to use Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade. As the first of the shades, we're going to use this on all of the stone. But as I'm doing all of the stonework for the night haunts and the related scenery and things like that with a slight bluish tint, we're using Drakenhof Nightshade rather than Nuln Oil. Obviously if you're doing your stone in a different colour, that's fine too. This is always down to personal preference. And once we've shaded all that, we'll come on to the next shade. So you can see we've shaded pretty much the whole thing there. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Seraphim Sepia. I'm going to be painting up all of the bones. I'm going to give them a good coat so that you've got quite a bit in the eye sockets, just so you get that nice darkness to them. And make sure you catch all the details, so you've got sepia resting in all the recesses, just to give it those dark and shaded areas. Like so. Now we're actually using Citadel Agrax Earthshade. Failed to show the shade there. So we're going to keep adding this to all of the gold and the copper metallics. And once we're finished, we can move on to the next shade. So I failed to start the camera properly, so I have actually started this layer. So on the Dawnstone and on the silver metallics, we're going to be using Citadel Nuln Oil to work that into the recesses there, so just give that a good coat. Again, this is just to break up the colour of this section, so you've got a few different shades to make the scenery look a bit more varied. Now we're going to use some Citadel Agrax Earthshade again. We're actually going to do all of the Rhinox hide. So all of the earth, whatever earth colour you've used, just want to use the Agrax Earthshade on that. This could have been done earlier with the gold, but I completely failed to paint it. So we've got an extra little section of video just to get this all nicely shaded. Once you've got all that done and it's all dry, we can come back to the next layer. Now we're going to start working on the rock again. So you've got Citadel Mechanicus Standard Grey. I'm going to be reapplying the base coat to all of these sections, which originally had the Mechanicus Standard Grey base coat. Now it doesn't have to be entirely smooth this. Obviously with stone you get discolorations, so it dries a little bit streaky. It's not too much of a worry. Just gives it that slightly more natural look, and you can see the way I'm painting that on there. It's a bit more rough and ready approach. You're making sure that you're leaving the Drakenhof Nightshade in the recesses, but then spreading the paint on however you choose to. With that colour done, we're now going to use some Citadel Dawnstone. I'm going to highlight all of the Mechanicus Standard Grey areas and also reapply the colour to the Dawnstone areas. So we're going to be doing this exactly the same as we did with Mechanicus Standard Grey. The Dawnstone graves, and then we're going to start highlighting the Mechanicus Standard Grey. Now you don't want to be covering the whole of the Mechanicus Standard Grey, just adding highlights to the top of it and any areas which are quite open, just to give it that look that light's catching it. So those highlights done, now I'm going to use a little bit of Vallejo White, just slightly dry brush the edges of all the stone, just to give them details up. And once we've finished dry brushing all the edges, we're going to come back with a brush and paint the lower edges where the light will be catching them, just to give you that 3D look. It's obviously 3D anyway, but the little bit of a highlight underneath some of those edges really does set it off. And when we come back, this layer will be finished. So rather than reapplying the Rhinox hide, which doesn't make too much difference, we're just going to go straight back onto the shade using Citadel Mournfang Brown. And you're just going to lightly dry brush this over the shaded Rhinox hide. That'll give it a nice little highlight, just bring out a little bit of colour there. All this is really is a bit of filler between the gravestones, because the gravestones and the slabs have all the detail on them, so they're the things that catch the eye. And this area is just basically filling the gaps in between, so you don't need to go over the top with that. So now I'm just going to start working on the gold with a little bit of Citadel Retributor armour. Now you can use this pretty much everywhere that you use the gold, so long as you're leaving the Agrax Earthshade in the recesses, that's fine. Like so. Next we're going to use a little tiny bit of Citadel Fulgurite copper. I'm just going to apply a little tiny bit of a highlight to this plate here, because we are going to weather that in a bit. Like so. Now we're going on to Citadel Liberator Gold. I'm going to highlight the gold sections, give that a little bit more of a shine. Like so. Next we're going to use some Vallejo Modular Chrome mixed with the Liberator Gold. I'm just going to do one final highlight on those gold sections just to give it that really nice shine. Make a few of the little details stand out. Like so. Now we're going to weather the copper using Citadel Nihilak Oxide. I'm just going to give this a decent coat of it. Start putting it on quite thin and then get a bit more on a brush to spread it around. Because you want this fairly weathered. You've seen the roof of the Mausoleum that we painted up last time, which I'll link here. As you can tell with the roof of that, the roof was very well and truly blue. That's the kind of effect that we're going for in this bronze, but not quite to the same extent. Hasn't been left to the elements as much. Now I'm going to start working on the bones, so it's Citadel Rakarth Flesh, and we're just going to reapply some of this base colour to them. Like so. Next up we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Ushabti bone. And just highlighting all the skulls and all the bones. So you want to think about where the light's going to be hitting them and highlighting those areas. It's catching any light on the ridges or any little details that are standing out, while leaving the shades and the previous layers. And just finish these off. Next up we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo White mixed in with the Ushabti bone. I'm just going to highlight all these skulls and bones, just at a final extreme highlight that is. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to start weathering the metal on the top here. So you want to think about where it's going to weather. So we want some around each of the bolts, so the bolts have rotted over time, exposed to the elements a little bit. The damp's got to them. Also a few little areas where maybe the metal's a bit more tarnished. We will be weathering the whole stone, but I'm going to do that as a separate video because there's quite a few little different bits you can do on that. That'll be up Sunday. Just get the nice weathering on this metal plate for now. So now it's going to be some Citadel Seraphim Sepia. We're just going to work that into the area that you just put the Agrax Earthshade on. Not all of the area, just general parts of it, and then spread it around other areas too. This gives a more yellowy orange colour that you can use as a base for when you're applying rust. It's a very quick and easy method of getting that kind of rust colouring on there. like so. Now to finish that off, we're going to be using a little bit of Citadel Ryza rust. You're just going to lightly dry brush that onto the areas where the Seraphim Sepia is, just make that a little bit more orange, so it has corroded a lot over time. You got that bright orangey look on the rust. Like so. So next up we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Athonian Camoshade. It's the final part for this video, and we're just going to use some of this on the skulls, where the skulls have been left in the damp ground. They've started to rot a little bit. You've got little bits of like mildew and the green kind of stuff that grows on bones. If you ever see bones out in a field or anything like that, they'll tend to have a bit of green on them, where stuff started to grow. So that's the kind of effect we're going for. You don't need to put loads on so they're really, really green. Just that hint of green on the bone, where as though it's in all the sort of like the recesses and cavities of it. And that is the finished base. Now the base here has got the weathering on that we're going to be doing in the next video. So you won't have the runs and the little pools, but your base is good to go. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.